can't believe anybody listens to this fucking show. I'm your host as always, Juan, and we meet again, Jeffrey. What's up, dude?
What's up, my man? How you doing?
Just hanging out. I just woke up from a nap, dude.
Oh, did you? I'm getting you fresh out of the nap state.
I hate waking up because I wake up disoriented. The other day, I was napping. My wife came into the room and I asked her if she had cut the grass and if she had tripped the grass sensor. I was like, "Hey, did you cut the grass?" And she's like, "What are you talking about?" And I was like, I kept asking her, "Did you trip the grass sensor?" She's like, "Dude, what?" I'm just so out of it, dude. Where do you there you go. We can start talking about that.
Oh,
Before we get started, let people know where they can find your podcast, your social media links, and all that stuff. That way they can look your shit up.
they can find me personally everywhere at Hey Jeffrey Davis, and find my podcast, The Functionally Dysfunctional Show, everywhere at Funk Dysfunct Show, FUNC Funk Dysfunct Show, and yeah, that's where I can be found.
Nice,
Streamlined
awesome.
that shit a little bit since last time.
Yeah, and if you want to see how to ruin a podcast episode on there with Gnosticism, check out the episode that I did with, what was it, 50, what, 52, 53?
52 or 3. Give me 2 seconds and I'll be able to tell you exactly. But yeah, 52 or 3. It was, and no, it was not fucking ruined. Are you fucking kidding me, man? That wasn't ruining anything. It was a great conversation.
It goes off the
52.
deep end, dude. When you talk to people about that sort of thing, it's crazy, but it goes back way further than just them. You know what I mean? It goes back to Plato, and then from Plato to Pythagoras, from Pythagoras to the ancient mystery schools of Egypt, right? So, and what I meant to say was, where do you subscribe to the idea that when we're asleep? Because I love the Adamic dream concept. I hadn't learned about that until I had talked to you, that I had you on the first time on the episode, on the show. The Adamic dream, where we are some dream created by Adam, who's fallen asleep somewhere is it in the Garden of Eden where he falls asleep?
I don't know. That's a good question. I don't have the answer to that question. And that's funny you mentioned it. I've never really thought about it as being the Adam being the one that's doing the dreaming, which is what you just said, whether you meant it that way or not. But I've never thought about it like that. Going, oh, is it Adam's dream?
Wait, so is it not Adam? Because I thought the Adamic dream. That's what I thought it was. What it was all about. The
Adamic dream would be that Ha Adam, the humanity.
Oh, so the
human
two
fell asleep. Yeah,
oh,
humanity
shit.
is asleep and not in the Matrix, right?
Yeah.
But speaking of things I never thought of that you hear every day, just yesterday I was listening to this video, and this guy was talking about some stuff that I'm still processing, and that's the way my mind works, by the way. Like, I don't just hear some cool shit and go, "Oh, that's my jam, that's my shit," you know. I go, "Wow, haven't thought about that. Interesting. Let me mull it over. Let me do some more thought and study and see what it's about." I'm not going to just necessarily adopt it, which I think a lot of people assume when you entertain an idea, that people, I think, assume that, oh, well, that's your new paradigm. And because I don't know why people assume that, but I think that most people do. Anyway, just yesterday I came across this I was watching this video, and this guy goes, he's talking about consciousness and all kinds
on
of
that thought. Before you move on,
Go ahead.
I forgot who it was, what philosopher or historic person that I think it might have been Socrates or somebody. So it's the symbol of a wise man to be able to discuss certain ideas without accepting them. And we live in this society where, like you said, as soon as you talk about a certain idea, you automatically believe it. Like I told you earlier before we started, I talked about something on YouTube. I posted one of the clips, and somebody was like, "Oh, well, you need to accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior because he's the one." I'm like, I'm just portraying an idea. You know what I mean?
Just talking here, buddy.
So yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead. I think it might have been Socrates.
No, shit. Yeah, I can't argue with that. But so the guy goes, so he's talking about human beings, and he goes, human noun, beings, verb. And I went, hold on a second. And I thought about it. I went, we call ourselves human beings, but is that wrong? Are we humans being? Right? And I was like,
listen,
holy
dude,
shit. Never thought about it like that.
I didn't want to have to do this, but I guess this is the way the universe works. But I'm going to have to break out some of the Pythagorean thought, and
do it.
It's got to do with that. So I'm just going to lightly touch on it. Okay. I'm just going to lightly touch on it. So Pythagoras, right, which he was the one that arguably you can accredit the word philosopher to, because before him, they were known as sages. But a sage is a person who knows the knowledge. A philosopher is a person who is seeking the knowledge, right? So you can't have the knowledge without seeking it, okay? The wisdom. So to touch on that, because I think it falls in line with what you're trying to get at. To the Pythagoreans, the idea of the one, the source, God, they called that monad. And that is the symbol for that is because and it's not numerology the way that they did it, right? And it gets very weird, right? As all these occult people do, right? It gets very weird. But monad to them was the source, the one, and it's a dot, right? A dot it's perfect.
Okay.
And to this also represented identity, right? Any fundamental singular metaphysical entity is the monad. And he goes on to say our own identity is our own monad, the identity in things representing themselves. Okay. So, like you said, are we human beings? I think we talked about that last time on the episode we did. Are we humans or are we what is it that they say, like we're gods having a human experience, right? That's the whole thing about the divine spark with the Gnostics, where we are gods having this experience. And I was talking to a buddy of mine who it always blows his mind that I can recall these things, right? Like the history and because I've always been fascinated with history, right? Social studies was always my favorite subject in school.
Me too.
I don't know what it is that I can click and recall something, because I've listened to so many hours of podcasts and so many hours of lectures, and I can recall, because again, when you enjoy something,
right,
your mind is all there, right? You can recall things better. And I think that's what it is for me, that I enjoy this. And I told them, and I said, even though, dude, this is what all these guys back then were trying to do. They were trying to understand the reality of things,
right?
The reality of the universe, the reality of everything, right? And myself, knowing all the things that I know about history, I still can't tell you what that reality of things are.
Gotcha.
These guys back then, they took it a step further. They did shit that was questionable, right? And by that I mean the occult arts of summoning certain things and channeling certain things, which a lot of these ancient books that we have could arguably said that they were channeled. Like Aleister Crowley, for example, a lot of the books that he wrote were channeled through what beings from other realities, other realms.
Right.
And when I listen to Manly P. Hall speak, it is the most amazing thing that he was able to recall. He was doing lectures until he was like 80 something years old, right?
Really?
Yeah. And if you watch him, it's a weird thing, because he was a 33-degree Freemason, right?
Ooh.
So he was up there with them.
There's an episode.
Yeah, he was up there with them, right? What was all that about? Are they truly about finding God, right? Who is God? Who even is God? Who is this architect of the universe, right?
Oh man.
And
right.
So yeah, it's crazy, right? So when you hear him talk, it's almost like he's in this trance-like state, almost like he is channeling some sort of knowledge. Because dude, he'll talk for 3 hours without a fucking single note without a single like stuttering or nothing, bro. He'll just talk like perfectly. And I go, holy shit. And for Manly P Hall, I have 8 gigabytes of material from him. Right. So it's just hours and hours of lectures of just esoteric and occult subjects that, again, I'm pretty sure somewhere in the Bible it says be weary about people who speak this sort of knowledge. But, I can't get behind it all, because even the people behind the church, they do and did some nefarious shit. So who can you really trust, bro? You know what I'm talking? You know what I mean? Like, I want to be like, okay, well, I was on I forgot where I was. It was on the subject of King James, right?
Okay.
Another questionable figure of the movement for the Christians. We can't look past the facts that King James, the whole reason we have a King James version of the Bible was because he broke off from the crown, right? He wanted to have the reason he broke off from the crown was because he wanted to marry somebody else, and he knew the Pope wouldn't approve of his divorce. So he said, fuck it, broke away anyways, right? So they could annul that marriage. And his people, they needed a version of the Bible. So this is where the King James version of the Bible came from, right? With these other versions of the Bible, right? That we can talk about. And one of the things that gets me when it comes to King James was supposedly he was gay. He liked men.
Really?
Yes. There's rumors.
Never heard that, but I mean, most people and most monarchs have at least enjoyed the company of men, as it were, right? I mean, that's throughout history. That's been the way it's been.
Supposedly,
for some reason,
he was swinging that way. Okay, he liked men, supposedly. There's also the rumors of Francis Bacon, who some say he was William Shakespeare, was also a sodomite, took it in the ass. Supposedly he edited the final versions of the Bible. But there are other questionable things that he wrote. He was part of these. The thing that gets me about King James was he was part of these witch trials. And in this time, he wrote a book about demonology. And it's called Demonologia, right? I think it's supposed to, I forgot what
King James did?
King James, yes, sir. Absolutely.
Really?
King James, yes, sir.
I didn't know that. That's interesting.
So, and interestingly enough, in that book, right? I think it was in the 1593 or some shit like that.
Wow.
He talks on it, and let me pull it up so I can talk
You're
about it.
the same way I am. I don't like speaking about something unless like misquoting if I don't have it right in front of me.
I'm sorry, demonology, daemon. So, and a daemon is either good or evil. It's a loaded Greek term. So,
oftentimes a source of inspiration.
Yeah,
as much as torment.
Demonology in form of a dialogue divided into 3 books by the high and mighty Prince James. Okay, published in 1597 by King James the Sixth of Scotland. Okay. Later also James the First of England. Okay. When he broke away from Scotland. Okay.
Right.
As a philosophical dissertation on contemporary necromancy and the historical relationship between the various methods of divination used from ancient black magic.
Sounds a whole lot like Solomon.
Interesting, right? It was reprinted again in 1603 when James took the throne of England. Okay.
Wow.
So I was like, okay, that's kind of weird, because the stance that he takes in this was almost like an apologetic stance, almost like a sympathetic stance for the witches that were being burned, because he was witnessing these trials.
Okay.
And he wrote this in turn. So I was like, okay, whatever. Check this out. This book is believed to be one of the main sources used by William Shakespeare in the production of Macbeth.
No shit.
Shakespeare attributed many quotes and rituals found within the book directly to the Weird Sisters. yet also attributed the Scottish themes in setting reference from the trials in which King James was involved. So I was like, okay, that's weird. So in this book, this included a study on demonology and the methods demons use to bother troubled men. It also touches on subjects such as werewolves and vampires.
No shit.
It was a political yet theological statement to educate a misinformed populace on the history, practices, and implications of sorcery and the reason for persecuting a witch in a Christian society under the rule of canonical law. So he wrote this book to talk to people and educate them on these practices. Why does it matter, bro?
What's the book called?
Demonology. So just like that, demonology, but at the end it's IE. And it was first published in 1597. And mind you, this is the King James from the Bible, the King James version, okay? But it gets a little weirder, Jeffrey, okay? Because, you know, this is just the tip, right? Oh, it's just the tip. Once you start digging deeper, you go, okay. And this is why I tell people, you need to understand a lot of the things that we use today, we don't know about. You don't know, okay? So maybe the original magician or sorcerer or whoever it was, he had a certain intention with it. And maybe you are carrying some of that intention for him after the fact. We're talking about something that was printed in the 1600s, okay? The King James Version Bible.
Right. So
he inspired Shakespeare, which is a questionable figure in history who some talk about that he didn't even exist. So let's keep going down. One of the things that really caught my eye, right? One of the things that really caught my eye, because these are 3 separate books. Book 1, the argument of the first book is on the following topics: the division of various magical arts with a comparison between necromancy and witchcraft, the use of charms, circles, and conjurations, the division of astrology, the devil's contract with man, comparisons between the miracles of God and the devil, the purpose of these practices to advise people. That's book 1, dude. That's some deep shit right there.
Right?
Tell you what, that's some deep shit.
Oh, I'm gonna fucking order these books.
Book 2. The main argument of the second book is based on the following topics regarding the sorcery and witchcraft: the difference between biblical proof and imagination or myth, a description of sorcery and its comparison with witchcraft, the path of a sorcerer's apprenticeship. Mind you, this is the guy who authorized the King James Version of the Bible. Curses and the roles of Satan, the appearance of devils, the times and forms which they appear, the division of witch actions, so like witches, methods of transportations, and the illusions of Satan. It's pretty weird. But the one that really struck me, dude, book 3. The third book is the conclusion of the whole dialogue. So I guess it's a dialogue between two people, almost like Plato, when he would fucking come up with an idea, he would do it in the forms of dialogue between two people. And the third book, James says that demons are under the direct supervision of God and are unable to act without God's permission. Okay. And he shows how God uses demonic forces as a rod, quote unquote, rod of correction when men stray from his will. Demons may also be commissioned by witches or magicians to conduct acts of ill will against others. He quotes previous authors who state that each devil has the ability to appear in diverse shapes or forms for varying purposes. Ultimately, the works of demons, despite their attempts to do otherwise, will end in the further glorification of God.
Bruh. Man, that.
Fuck, dude. Tell me, how can we deny this? How can we deny this, dude? This is history. This is not conspiracy. This is history. This is a book written by the man who authorized the English translation of the Bible in his time. And it is one of the versions of the Bible that we revere today. Okay, how can we ignore this? What is the purpose of this? Tell me. And was he a magician? Did he know about all these things? How was he able to write these things to inspire one of the biggest, arguably one of the biggest contributors to the English language which was William Shakespeare? Okay, we can talk about his influence on the English language, right? So tell me what the purpose of this was. So James provided a description of all the kinds of spirits and specters that trouble men or women. His classifications of demons is not based on separate demonic entities with their names, ranks, or titles. Instead, demonic entities are categorized according to the methods that they are used to inflict mischief or torment on a living individual or deceased corpse. The 4 categories: specter, obsession, possession, and fairies. Bro.
So,
where do we take this, Jeffrey? Where do you want to go with it? Because I can fucking go on.
See, that's me. I can go forever down that rabbit hole, right? I mean, my mind keeps going back to it. I'm looking it up right now. My mind keeps going back to Solomon, and I believe for you as a Gnostic, I believe Solomonic magic, I think, is something you're aware of and familiar with, correct?
Yes.
So, Solomon was, and I'm looking for it.
Do you know why the Rastafarians regard weed in such a high manner?
No, why?
Because this is history. Weed was growing on the tomb of Solomon, the wisest man in the world,
really?
in the history of man, right? What was the whole thing with King Solomon? King Solomon, when he spoke to God, he didn't ask him for riches. He said, I want the knowledge of everything,
right?
Of animals, of nature. I want wisdom, right? So what did God do? God blessed him with the wisdom of everything,
right?
And depending on which timeline of King Solomon you want to go down, he had 10,000 concubines and wives, right? And this was a man that people would travel from the edges of the world to come see him talk because he had all the wisdom in the world. And a lot of his concubines were pagans, right? Mm-hmm. And they would try and coerce him and talk to him into worshiping who? Moloch. Mm-hmm. Okay. They said, hey, just leave a locust, on the altar of Moloch. And he always said no. Right? Until eventually he did and gave an offering to Moloch. What does it say in the Bible? Don't offer your kids up to Moloch. Moloch is the demon or the god of child sacrifice. So eventually,
really?
Yes, eventually he did. Right? Eventually he did. And they say that he was replaced on the throne with a demon who ordered through using jinn, right? Demons.
I was just fixing to go there. Yeah, right.
The building of the temple of Jerusalem. Okay.
And yeah, this is extra canonical as the official word, right?
I want to get into the next thing before we get there. Okay.
No,
they say they say that Metatron dropped Solomon the stone that Solomon used on his ring to be able to what? To control
you
demons.
Wear the seal.
Okay.
Right.
They also say Metatron was the angel that held back Abraham's hand before he killed his son.
Yeah.
Okay. Metatron was who? Enoch, the only man to have not died but be taken up to God. Right. So.
Oh, Metatron is supposedly the quote unquote angel that took Enoch away.
No, he becomes Metatron. Enoch becomes Metatron.
Oh. Huh.
Yes. And so at the end of the book of Enoch, he becomes Metatron, and he's almost like this architect that holds reality together.
I read that.
Do what?
It's been a long time since I read the book of Enoch. A long time. I forgot that.
There's 3 versions of it. The second 2 are questionable in origins, but the first one is supposedly legitimate, right? Which all these scriptures are.
Right, and so that's the funny part, and people listening may go, well, the only thing that is real is the Bible as we know it. And I go, well, I mean, who the fuck do you think said that shit was real and the truth? It sure as shit wasn't a deity. It was a bunch of men.
Yeah.
Sitting around a table saying, what narrative do we want to present?
It was funny. I was listening to somebody the other day, and they're like, I think it might have been the last podcast on the left where they were like, oh yeah, and they were talking about something like, yeah, in this canon, this didn't happen or something. And I thought that was the funniest fucking thing, because I was like, because I think about that in theology, like in this canon, for the Ethiopians, the Book of Enoch is in their canon.
Yep.
Okay, it's a canonical text, and in the King James Version, there are references to the Book of Enoch, but Enoch is not regarded as a canon.
Right, not in the Christian Bible. It's too fucking weird, right? There's too much you can't explain. And we can get into, the way you view the Bible and the error of looking at it from a Western mindset as a history book, or as a book of guidelines, or as a guidebook for life. And there's all kinds of flaws in those things, right? And but going, not to get too far removed from the question you asked, but going, where do you want to go with this episode from here is everywhere, right? It's not where do I want to go, it's where do we have the time to go in this one episode.
I think that's a very heavy introduction, and I think that's something that people aren't willing to accept, and that's why people such as the person who commented on my YouTube video, oh, God is was it John 3:16? Is that the one where it says accept Jesus as your Lord and Savior? Was that the one? No, it's not, right? Or is that the one where he says that? Jesus, man.
John 3:16 is
he gave his only son, right? For God so loved the world.
Of the world, he gave his only son.
Excuse me as I got my canons mixed up.
No, you fine. And so I was just having a conversation with a friend, with a co-host on my podcast the other day, off mic, because we do talk off mic, and we're talking about, and I mentioned something, I said something about exegesis, and she goes, what now? And sometimes, even I'm all these years removed from professional ministry, and sometimes I still forget how little 99.999% of people actually know about religion and about study of any holy text. Holy, right? I mean, who said it was holy? Well, the text, right? And you can't use the proof as the claim, right? Or you can't use the claim as the proof. So, and I was talking about the hermeneutical circle and and how to exegete the scripture, and how because there's someone that's recently been on my podcast that is a psychotherapist. They've done a lot of energy work and stuff like that. And this person has, like, quote unquote, found Jesus, and they've, like, bailed on everything they knew, and not just bailed, but said, I was deceived. It's of the devil. It's, I was like, whoa. And I had her on my podcast not too long ago, and they were citing all these Bible verses, and I'm looking at it going, this is the way that most people read whatever holy text they choose to read, whether it be the Bible, the Quran, the Talmud, the Bhagavad Gita, whatever you read, as your holy book, if you have one. And you look at it through your own bias, and that is completely the absolute wrong place to even begin approaching a text like that of any kind. You can't look at it through your eyes. That's the end. That's the completion of the hermeneutical circle, right? You have to first understand who was the writer, and I'm talking like every single fucking verse, chapter, book, however that text is organized. You have to first consider who's the author, who's their audience, what's happening in the world that is shaping their perspective, what are they writing about, what does it mean for the people that it was written for. And that's just the tip of the iceberg then, right? We have to go, okay, well, what biases does it obviously appear that the writer has based on their other writings that we have and all these things? And based on all that shit, you can go, okay, here is, relatively speaking, the best that we can come up with what the writer was actually saying to the audience that it was written for.
In their language.
In their language, in their time, in their culture, in their time. And after all that, what, if any, meaning does that have, or does that, or application does that have to me? And that's like the end of it, right? You have to fucking understand. Like, people throw up the Book of Revelation all the time. The Book of Revelation is a extended metaphor for the evils of the Roman Empire. Has nothing to fucking do with end times.
Nero. He talks about Nero. 666 is Nero.
Yeah,
Nero Kaisamar.
Yeah, and there's all kinds of, you mentioned numerology. There's all kinds of numbers and symbolism that, if you know anything about Rome at the time, it's clearly writing about the Roman Empire. But if you don't know anything about Rome at the time and how many governors there were and how the government was set up, then you look.
There were 7 emperors.
Then you look at it and go, "Oh, look at this shit, end times, bitch." No, you're just ignorant to the context of the writing, and that's not. And I get a little bit heated about that, and that's all these years. I'm almost 2 decades removed from any kind of church or professional ministry, and I still have like a hair trigger to get set off by someone spouting nonsense about the Bible or scripture or any religion. And I go, really? You have completely misunderstood what this is. And it's hard for me not to be condescending sometimes, and that's not helpful to any kind of conversation to be condescending, right? So it's hard not to be, but damn, at the same time. Right? I mean, I don't know what else to say.
You're gonna make me do it, bro. You're gonna make me do it. I can't. So, of course, in some weird synchronistic way. And for those that don't know, that haven't listened to our previous episode, Jeffrey here is an ex-evangelist. And the reason that we get into this heresy and these heretical things is because, number one, it's something that's always interested me. And number two, these are questions that I'm sure a lot of people have who are afraid to talk about.
Oh, yeah.
I had mentioned earlier John 3:16 and 1 Corinthians 3:16. It just so happens, and I always have these weird synchronistic moments where what are the chances? One of the verses that's attributed to what the Gnostics believe in is questionable shit.
Mm-hmm.
The verse in its in context is, well, the verse is, let me see how many versions. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's 6 different versions, right? But let's read the New International Version. And it says, "Don't you know that you yourselves are God's temple, and that God's Spirit dwells in your midst," right? In your midst.
Mm-hmm.
And then in its full context is, you are God's temple, right? If it is burned up, he will suffer loss. He himself will be saved, but only as if through the flames. And it says, "Do you not know that you yourselves are God's temple, and that God, if anyone destroy God's temple, God will destroy him, for God's temple is holy, and you are that temple." And that can be interpreted in a lot of different ways, right? Some people say, "Oh, is he saying that we are God's?" Right?
What verse is that again?
1 Corinthians 3:16. Please open up your Bibles to 1 Corinthians 3:16.
You know why it's called 1 Corinthians?
I feel like I'm fucking doing some. My neighbor invited me to a Bible study group not long ago, and I was like, "Yeah, I'm not the guy." I'm not the guy, bro. I'll start talking about the Book of Enoch, and they'll be like, "What the fuck?"
I'll ask the hard questions, but I'll go, right?
So, and the reason I bring this up was because, again, we're talking about these ideas of what does this all mean? What were the intentions? What was the setting? the Old Testament is questionable, right? Because in that series of texts, there seems to be a different type of God, right? Yahweh, if you will. And they say that he's a God of evil, right? A very jealous and righteous God who, there's no one above me and there's no one like me, right? So people attribute that to him being the demiurge, and also the book of Chronicles, right? Chronos, which we can attribute to Saturn and the whole idea that the demiurge is Saturn and the Satan archetype, Moloch. And yeah, it's very interesting, but that was one of the texts I had been reflecting on as of lately in my divings of heresy, if you will. And I just thought it was interesting that it was 3:16 as well as John 3:16, because I got told today on some, everybody on YouTube is mean to me, so
wasn't mean to you. Don't be mean to me.
So mind you that a lot of the guys, to touch on the subject of we don't know what the origins of certain things are, a lot of the guys that contribute to the philosophical workings and studies of everything since we've known from the very beginning, a lot of those guys, the reason, and it can relate to King Solomon, right? Because he wanted wisdom, he wanted knowledge. The reason these guys dive into the occult and do these occultic practices is because they want to step it up that much further. A lot of these guys were Rosicrucians. They say that Francis Bacon and all these guys that helped and contributed to the writing of the Bible, they put Rosicrucian symbols within the Bible. Because again, the golden ratio, when the Egyptians came up with it, the reason that they incorporated and incorporated that ratio and everything that they did was so that they would always have something of the source or the God within everything that they did. So they would incorporate that golden ratio in everything that they did. This is what sacred geometry has to do. That's why I wear a Metatron's Cube pendant, because energy flows through everything, right? Through this sacredness, and it is all one, right? That's the whole thing. It's all one, one for all. What was it? All for one and one for all. So that's why to the Pythagoreans, monad, the one, the dot, is so sacred to them, because they believe that this is where it all started. And it gets very, very in depth. And I'm writing an episode of the symbolism of numbers, according to the Pythagoreans, of 1 through 10, 10 being the most sacred number, right? And every single number has its own thing. And I want to discuss one more little snippet here that has to do with what we're talking about, speaking on Yahweh and all this stuff. The Tesseract, right? Number 4.
Oh, shit.
Right? The 4, or the Tesseract, in Pythagorean thought was a symbol of intellect, and they referred to it as the holy number. Number 4, right? Isn't 7 is 777, right? So the simple math addition, and mind you, Nikola Tesla, Galileo said mathematics is the language in which God has written the universe. And we see this in the Torah and these, right, and these different religions. Nikola Tesla always said, if you only knew the magnificence of 3, 6, and 9, then you would have the key to the universe. So what the fuck did Nikola Tesla mean by that? So the number 4, the Tesseract, which is a cube, through the addition of 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4, and every single number has its own meaning, you have 10, 10 being the most sacred number. So the only way you're able to achieve 10 is with 4. So they called this number the little holy number, right? 4 carries with it the symbolism of the forces or powers in the universe by which the material world was brought into existence. And it gets into Orpheism and that origin story.
Oh, I don't know.
But
I've never even heard that term.
yeah, so you can talk about the
Orpheism.
4 elements of matter: earth, water, air, and fire.
Mhm.
4 is also known as the demiurge's number, or the number of the mental or intellectual region of the universe. So they spoke about this supreme consciousness. According to the Kabbalah, the name of the deity responsible for the creation contains 4 letters or characters. These letters or characters are called in Hebrew the tetragrammaton. I'm sorry. Also known as the name for the national god of Israel. The form Yahweh is now accepted universally because there's no consensus about the structure or etymology of the name. This name appears in the Torah and the rest of the Hebrew Bible. The number 4 not only represents the elements, also represents the directions north, east, west, and south. The 4 sciences: mathematics, biology, social studies, and physical science. And when you open up a tesseract, it forms a cross. So it can also be interpreted in the form of a cross, the 4 arms of a cross, okay? So when the cross is the symbol of matter or materiality, it is a symbol of the body. It represents the world. Hence, that's why Christ was what? Crucified on a cross, okay? And you got to remember that all these guys back then, they all use symbols. So when you see the things that they do, whether it be the Bible or any secret society, what they've always regarded numbers as this sacred thing. Just like the Pythagoreans, to them it was this enigmatic thing that they used to achieve and receive wisdom or knowledge. And the Pythagoreans believe that man has 4 powers in which he can use to orient himself in this material realm. Okay. That's just the number 4, bro. That's just the number 4. Okay. And you see how deep that can get. And it goes way further than that, right? We talk about the different forces and equilibrium and these different ideas that they used back then. Now, was it a narrative fallacy to be able to understand the realities of nature? Perhaps, right? Perhaps it was, because just like everything else, there's this nihilistic side of me as well that sometimes I think about things and I go, maybe what if it's all bullshit? And what if none of it matters? The Matrix isn't real and we're just here just to exist, right? How much of it is that? What if, when you look at a shape and, when you're in your room in the dark and you look at a shape and it makes something that's got a name and it's your mind trying to comprehend what it's looking at. So it'll form whatever your mind can comprehend to be able to understand it.
Really?
Yeah. But then it's like, how much of it is truly metaphysical? Dude, if people truly understood the concept of quantum computing and what quantum computing consists of, you go, there's no fucking way that is real. There's no way that is something. It's magic, bro. At the end of the fucking day, if you read and try to comprehend what quantum physics, it's the metaphysics. That's there's no if, ands, or buts about it. The guy who created the binary code in which we use in computers, right? The ones and zeros. Even he understood the fact. Mind you, Rosicrucian. All these guys are Rosicrucian. Isaac Newton, Rosicrucian. Right? Really? All these guys. Yes. Huh. He understood, and their whole thing was always what? To be able to find the source. God, the one. The Godhead that everybody tries to reach at the end of the day, if there even is one. And I don't know if that's a product of being a man, right? Of being men, of wanting to build that Tower of Babel to be able to reach certain heights, right? And what was the whole thing with the Tower of Babel? It was like, oh, well, when man puts his mind to something, he'll get it done,
right?
He'll get it. So we have to stop this, right? What do we have today? We have all these technological towers of Babels. What the fuck are they doing at CERN, bro?
Oh, dude, I wonder what percentage of people know that CERN exists, and that the most destructive force we've ever produced in our species history is right there at
they have
we're colliding.
A statue of Shiva in the front.
I know, isn't that weird?
When he's doing her I believe it's a her when they're doing the I think it's the dance of war or some shit. So check this out. on this thought. China tested a fractional orbital bombardment system that uses a hypersonic glide vehicle.
I just heard that.
That came out the other day, and then today, China's claim that its fractional orbital bombardment system was a spaceplane test doesn't add up. That was the. We have talks of you mentioned the Book of Revelation, and you have talks of wormwood, which is another another questionable thing, right? Where it's like, is wormwood an asteroid? Is it Nibiru, the 10th planet that's going to come in and crash with ours? Like, what is all that about? You know what I mean?
There is. So here's the funny thing. Like, the more you learn, and I don't care what it's about, religion, science, astrophysics, microbiology, human nature, whatever art, whatever it is that the more you learn, I think there has to be a time it's in that journey that you hopefully, God, I hope people do this, take a step back at some point and go, you know what? The more I learn, the more I realize I don't know. And the more I realize I don't know, the more I realize that it's not that there's a lot that I don't know. It's that I don't know anything in the scope of everything. and excuse me. And if once you realize that no one knows anything about everything, then that means that all bets are off. And reality could be something massively different than we even think we comprehend. And to say that it's one thing when it's clear that it has a chance to be many things is an adventure in missing the point, in my opinion. Because the second you say, "Oh, I know what is. I know what reality is. I know what God is. I know what we are. I know what I am." The second you say those things, your brain just shuts the fuck off, in my opinion. And you don't stop, you don't continue thinking, but what if? And religion, I think I said it in our last episode here on your show, is religion, unfortunately, more times than not, in my opinion, is a crutch that makes you turn your fucking brain off. And I get it. I truly understand why people do it. Because the alternative is scary as fuck.
What's the alternative?
Right? Admitting that you don't know, that you have absolutely no relative direction in space and time. Because there may not actually be a relative direction in space and time. Time may be completely a construct of the human experience. It's a possibility. There's some theoretical math that supports it, right? To accept that you have no direction at all other than what you choose to set yourself on is scary to a lot of people. It's fucking liberating to me, but that's because of the journey that I've walked, and that's the place that I've come to. And so I understand why religion is attractive to so many people, because the alternative of, and I'm not saying, let me be clear, I'm not saying that I'm saying that I believe the alternative is nothingness. I think there's plenty of evidence to say that whatever the hell reality is, it's definitely not nothing. right? I think it's way more than we
Mhm.
think that it is.
Yep.
And I think that just putting it in this little box of whatever your religion says that it is a massively is a massive disservice to what you could be, what we could be, and what we could plug into and be a part of. I'm in my brain, I'm saying things that are, I'm like catching things as they run through my brain, and I'm like trying not to latch onto them, and I'm just making them very vague things that I could go into detail about all the things that ran through my head right there in that last 30 seconds, but I won't. and and I just think I again, I get it. I get why people latch on to religion, because it gives comfort and security, albeit false, in my opinion, to an uncertain existence. I understand why it's attractive, but I just don't think we're going to solve it. I think we're going to deal with the same fucking shit. We're going to kill each other over differences of opinion. We're going to go to war over resources and religion, and we're going to we're going to hate each other because of petty differences. And I think it's going to persist unless we rise up in awareness and in uh, existence of what we truly are, which is way more than just humans being. and I, until we do, we're just going to fight the same fucking battles over and over and over, I think.
Yeah.
I surmise.
I agree with you on that. That's why they say history doesn't
Repeats
repeat.
itself.
It often
Yeah.
rhymes. It often rhymes. So, and to quote Socrates, as for me, all I know is that I know nothing.
Right. And that's not a scary thing, right? For anyone that's listening, that's like, there's a term for it. It's called existential angst, right? When you come to the realization that you know nothing, that everything you thought you knew is just either totally false or just scratching the surface of what is in its entirety. The paralyzing fear that grips you in that moment is what's called existential angst, and it is scary as fuck. I went through it. I went through a extended period of it when I thought I had it all figured out, my life direction. I was a professional minister and evangelist and so on and so forth, and it was, I's were dotted, T's were crossed, and off we go. And to have that all fall apart around me, despite my efforts to hold it together for a good long while, was scary. And I used to say I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy, but I actually would wish it on my best friend, because I think it's liberating. And you can't free yourself to the possibility of what could be reality until you let go of what you assume is reality. I mean, yeah, I almost just went off on another rant, but I mean, it's scary, but it's freeing if you will entertain it. And a lot of folks won't, and I get it. And that's what religion does for people. It gives them their binky, right? It gives them their safety blanket. And I'm not belittling that. I'm really not. It's not for me anymore. But I don't think it makes you a bad person if that's where you find yourself. Just going, I want my neat little world, my neat little existence, and my neat little this and that, and I know what I know, and that's all that I need.
And
if that's
everything
you,
is blue for you. You know that
right?
song?
and if that's where you are, I don't think it makes you a bad person. It's just, I don't think it's going to solve any problems.
Yeah. If anything, it agitates, right? The construct that we find ourselves in,
or at least perpetuates it, right?
Because you talked about having these thoughts flying by and you grasping them. Plato talked about that, right? The theory of forms, where this world is full of imperfect forms of the perfect form that is actually like another dimension, pretty much, is what
form of the good.
Yeah, exactly what he talked about. And even just that idea, when you have an idea that comes and pops into your head, what is that even? You know what I mean? Like,
yep.
It's like they exist in this ether, and you're able to tap into it. And we're on a podcast that we can talk, right? I didn't know we could talk on podcasts, but what are we doing right now, bro? We are flapping these meat sacks that are in our throat to be able to convey a message through sound, through words that, like, none of this is real, bro. This is like some horror movie, you know what I mean? Like, it's just like some weird thing that just like, it's the craziest thing, and
it might be real.
I don't think we'll ever know the truth is the problem, dude. Like, for as much as, because all the guys who have been onto things heretical, right? That's just another. Man, you're gonna make me fucking bring up some more Pythagorean. So, and we'll wrap up on this point because there's so many ways and so many different things we can talk about.
Oh yeah.
And so the number 2, or the duad, it is regarded as an ill number. 2 represents things in which differences are to be noted, right? It is the number of illusions because difference. It is the number of illusion because difference is illusionary. It is the number of ignorance because illusion, the illusion of separateness, is the root of ignorance.
Hello.
Ignorance is transformed into wisdom only once unity is brought out of division. Okay. So chaos is related to the duad, and the cosmos is related to the monad. So it's almost like the logos for the Stoics is this being that has its own intellect. And for the Christians, the logos is very intimate, right? Is a one-on-one versus the Stoics that believe that it was something that you couldn't control. It was just fate. And mind you, what Carl Jung says is until you bring the subconscious to the conscious, you will call it fate and let it rule over your life. Something like paraphrasing it. So the cosmos is related to the monad, right? The one, this being that has its own consciousness. The universe regarded as an orderly or harmonious whole. That's what the monad is. Essential difference needs to be accepted by the mind to the appearance of difference, right? This brings forth what? Comparison, where we are tempted to elevate things above each other to try and understand the concept of what is good without trying to overcome the primary evil of division. This is where we get hierarchy, right? We are always forced to compare things with one another. There is no such thing as good and evil. There is only one which is best, which is perfect, right? The monad. It cannot be elevated to a higher sense or a higher being. This is why they regarded the one, because you can't break it down. You can break down 2 into 1, right? But 1, you can't break it down. So it's perfect, right? So in Pythagorean thought, elevation is motion towards unity. Things divided cannot be supreme because of imbalance. So what I just finished saying. The duad being a symbol of separation drives man from the truth, leading us to the concept of intervals. Where there are intervals or distance, duad is inevitable. It cannot be avoided. Intervals become the great abyss that man must overcome to achieve restoration in a universal space. To be divided from God is to exist in a space of separation from reality. And
say that last part again.
Intervals, so distance, become the great abyss that man must overcome to achieve restoration in a universal space. To be divided from God is to exist in a space of separation from reality. Mind you, God being the source, not necessarily the capital G God, but
some religion,
a consciousness is pretty much, and this shit is very deep. Mind you, when I'm researching and looking into these things, I said, this is way above my pay grade. Okay. This type of shit, this philosophy is so up there, but you don't see this being talked about today.
No, not at all.
This concept of what hierarchy, this is what hierarchy does to people, to the human psyche, right? What do we have in society today? Hierarchies.
Yeah.
What makes you a better man than me? And vice versa. Nothing. Your social status of how much fiat currency you have in your bank account, your possessions, your house is bigger than mine, so automatically he must be better off. So this leads us to comparison, right?
Yeah, which is, that at the risk of starting a whole new conversation, which we can table till next time. That's one of the reasons that I have a big problem with dualistic thought is, it doesn't feel right to me, and I'm not saying that I'm right or accurate, but it doesn't feel right to me that something doesn't exist without an opposite, right? That beauty doesn't exist.
You watch Full Metal Alchemist?
No, I haven't.
So one of the things there is the concept of equal exchange. So whatever you take, you have to give something of equal or less value, right? And the Full Metal Alchemist is an anime.
Okay.
I don't know if you've seen it. It's got to do with alchemy, obviously. But yeah, they talk about that. The law of equivalent exchange, which how you're saying, in order in the universe for you to have something, you need to be able to give something up. Because it can't just happen, right? Energy can only be transformed. It can't be destroyed or you know what I mean? Was that the second law or third law of thermodynamics?
Right.
So
I forget which number it is, but yeah.
Yeah, one of those.
It's one of them.
a concept that some guy in the year fucking 300 or 600, whatever it is, came up with that we're using today. How wild is that? Right.
And there's so much of that shit, right? I mean, every world religion, many scientific advancements, rocketry and, physics and mathematics it's so.
What did I tell you? The sciences and all those guys, they use occult means to be able to achieve that. Now, I'm not saying that you need to dive into the occult to earn wisdom, but this is what those guys back then believed. They believed that through the worship, it's a form of worship because it's set in intention. It's magic. They're able to tap into, and a lot of the guys of monumental and these huge movements were part of secret societies that traces back to the ancient mystery schools of Mesopotamia, ancient Egypt, all these guys that were learning the knowledge that only the high priests knew about, right? That how the fuck did they attain it? Sure beats me, but I don't know how. Right. And we'll wrap up on this. Even though I talk about Pythagoras, you have to understand that this guy talked about you couldn't eat beans because it resembled a human fetus. So if you were to eat beans, you were committing cannibalism. Yes.
No shit.
Pythagoras practiced divination. He was regarded to be able to predict future events, to be able to talk to animals. And the story of origin for Pythagoras reflects that of Jesus Christ. There was an oracle who he was brought up through Immaculate Conception, and there was an oracle who told him that he was going to be this Messiah who was destined for great things. So, mind you, I'm writing an episode about that, but there's a lot of different things, and we'll end it on that note because this shit. That's why I love having conversations with you, Jeff, because they get deep, right? We're asking, you said, these hard questions that a lot of people don't ask, or a lot of people don't even fucking care about. Some people go, this is fucking stupid, and they turn this shit off. I had some other guy comment on a YouTube video. They said, what the fuck is this shit?
No shit.
It's like, I go, hey, you're entitled to your opinion, how I'm entitled to mine. I want to be a scholar. I want to learn, right? I want to dive deeper into the origins of everything. And if that means breaking it apart piece by piece, and listening to others that their knowledge, I believe it's in the Bible, it says, be weary of unearned wisdom, or I think that was somebody said that shit. But it falls into that idea that not everything can be the devil, dude. Just because some guy knows some shit that is against the grain, it doesn't always mean the devil, right? Galileo was excommunicated and exiled and pretty much crucified in a literal sense for believing that the earth orbited around the sun.
Right.
And that says a lot, because at the end of the day, he was right. And that was heresy back then.
And anytime you go against the status quo, and the status quo being not just the societal norm, but the way in which control is enacted over people, right? When you go against that status quo, it's going to be demonized and suppressed, and it always has been. It always will be. And just because you're going against the status quo doesn't make it wrong, or excuse me, it doesn't make it right. But just because it's not the status quo doesn't make it wrong either. I think it's worthy of discussion at the very minimum.
Absolutely. And quantum physics, quantum entanglement says that if I affect an atom here, I'm affecting an atom on the other side of the fucking universe. Okay,
that's ancient Hindu, right?
We have
as above, so below.
Exactly, the macrocosm and microcosm. So, Jeff, whenever you want to come on, dude, you can always hit me up. I always love having these deep conversations. Not everybody can hang, right? I think I blew your mind a little bit in the beginning there with King James.
I was loving it, dude. I love my mind being blown. As usual, I have my trusty notebook, right? I'm writing. Anytime my eyes are looking down, I'm like jotting furiously, shit to look up later.
And like I tell people, my friend told me, he's like, bro, you're probably one of the smartest people I know. No, I'm not. I remember things, and a lot of the things, even though this could be labeled as a conspiracy podcast, a lot of the things I say are history.
Yes.
And actual fact. A lot of things are open for interpretation, just how everything else is in life. Sure. But some of the things, such as history, you can't change unless we're in Orwell's 1984, which they change history real time. But yeah, and I encourage people to look these things up. And I don't know, probably. I encourage people to look things up and take the dive yourself, right? Look at things from a different perspective, and I welcome you. If I'll come on and I'll correct myself if I say something that's incorrect. That, again, through just the plethora of content that I'm just receiving and processing, I'll get mixed up, and I'll say something wrong. I'll come on the show and I'll correct myself, right? So, and I said, feel free to email me and let me know what you think if I said anything wrong, whatever. But again, look this shit up. It's out there. It's knowledge that for the time being is available, right? And by that I mean for the time being until some shit happens. Okay,
right.
So, one more time for the listeners, Jeff, where can they find your work? And I'll post that in the description notes as well.
Me personally at Hey Jeffrey Davis everywhere, Twitter, Twitch, Facebook, everything, Instagram, TikTok, and my podcast, The Functionally Dysfunctional Show, where we talk about all kinds of shit just like this. And that can be found everywhere at Funk Dysfunct Show.
Yeah, and like I said, make sure to show him some love and go listen to my episode on there that I did with him.
Absolutely.
Where I go on an hour-long rant on Gnosticism.
It's awesome. I mean, I love that. I love conversations where I actually don't speak much except to go, really?
You write this shit down.
What now? Let me jot that down. Yeah, I love that shit. And then just ask follow-up questions. I love that shit. Thanks for having me on, man.
Yeah, for sure. And I appreciate you coming on, man.